I'm Dan Michelson, CEO of RLDatix. Yeah, I've been in healthcare for over 30 years, and I've been in healthcare IT now for over, I guess it's 25 years. And it's interesting because I had never heard of RLDatix. And when I found out about it, I'm like, oh my, like the presence of this company is pretty stunning. So we have now a team of about 2,300 people in 20 countries, serving over 6,000 organizations, right? So who knew?
Yeah.
Right? And then on top of that, you kind of look at the product portfolio. It's super interesting, which we could talk more about. So these are problems that are really important that really haven't been solved and that are particularly acute right now for hospital CEOs or executives, as well as the team on the ground. I mean, there's just, healthcare is an incredibly complex place, right? And I think if you like working in this industry, you like working on problems, right? But getting to simple is really a challenge, right?
Yeah.
And I think this company has a unique position, unique role in doing just that.
I think that point around getting to simple is super important, but I imagine there's some complexities for you to unpack in I guess the progression, at least looking at it from the outside for RLDatix, that, similar to you, I'm like, oh, I hadn't heard of RLDatix. And then someone mentioned, Wristman. I'm like, oh yeah, of course I know Wristman. Like everyone knows Wristman. And it's like, oh yeah, okay. But then all these bits coming together now too.
It really depends what country you're in, right? Because we have different products in different markets to some extent, right? So you might know us in Australia as Riskman.
Yeah.
We also have Optima. We have DCIQ. In other markets, slightly different solutions. So how we harmonize that in the future is a big opportunity. But yeah, I think that's fair. Most people know us by the product name, as opposed to RLDatix as a company, as a collective company. That's part of the opportunity for the company.
I think part of the opportunity too, what I've taken from different sessions is there's different verticals of focus or interests that might previously been seen as standalone kind of offerings that play in their particular areas around policy or around payroll or whatever. But as I've kind of learned throughout the last day or two, that all these things needs to be intertwined, but then it's working out how to take those individual features and bring it together, right?
Well, listen, I've been in healthcare IT for a long time, and based on your podcast, you actually are talking to a ton of people in healthcare IT. And, the reality is there's a lot of promises made and promises broken in this industry. And, so I think when people look at, vendors, a lot of time they're looking at a product. What they really need is a partner. And I think that's a role that we can play. And so my look at it initially when I came into the company is, more from a problem orientation perspective. It's like, what's the problem that the company can solve?
Yes.
And, and I look at it from a customer lens first. And there's really three big, the way I look at it is if you're running a health system or a care system, whatever framework you want to use, whatever terminology you want to use, your three biggest assets at the end of the day are your reputation of your organization, your providers, your workforce, because over half your spend, doesn't matter where you are globally, is going to be on your team. And then lastly, increasingly, your data. And, there's a lot of data, there's not a lot of insight. People say that over and over again, but it is true. And AI kind of opens up some opportunities there. But anyway, so just think of it, as a company, if people are trying to understand RLDatix, really simplistically, is we're sort of the partner for that. I was going to say we're the app for that, but it's more than that. We're the partner, we're the platform for solving those problems. So like categorically, we have, risk and safety solutions. And, there's a saying, it's not a saying, it's actually the first rule of healthcare that, the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm. So that's the first promise that we make. We're the global leader, we're the default solution, we're the standard when it comes to managing risk and safety, period. Second area is workforce. So we have workforce solutions. NHS is a great example. So 95% of the people who work in the NHS log in every day to our system to figure out where they need to be, when they need to be there, and what they're going to do. So we're the default staffing, scheduling solution with a bunch of other, problems that we solve underneath that workforce framework. And the last one is on the data solution side. We've actually become the most significant player globally in migrating data because people switch from one system to another and then archiving that data, right? Because you need to be able to preserve it and then access it. So it's pretty interesting when you think about just really simplistically, think of safety, risk and safety, workforce, and data. Those are the three areas that we play in. And once again, you think about it as a market opportunity perspective. When you think of a company that does that, who is that company? And I think the approach that we need to think about is, well, our answer to that question has to be, why not us?
Yeah.
We can't think that it's us and have the arrogance to think that, nobody else can make those kind of claims.
Yeah.
But when you really look at it objectively on a global scale perspective, no one's playing like we are in those three domains.
Yeah. Well, you think about those functionalities of workforce management or payroll or even data migrations. I guess, if someone from the outside of healthcare says, we can migrate data and we can do these things, but migrations are messy, man. Like in healthcare, and I've seen, and there's like the complexity of it around healthcare. So the importance of being really in it is critical.
Well, that's true. And having done this for a couple of decades, you've seen tech companies come in and say they'll solve that problem. Yeah. But it's all about context. Healthcare it's in Australia, 10% of the GDP. In the U.S., it's 20% of the GDP. So it's the biggest industry in most economies and actually the largest employer. And it's sort of like, the risk that people run is oversimplified. Right? Oh, yeah, it's a problem. It's expensive. Access isn't good and the quality isn't great. And so they'll throw those type of, that type of critique at healthcare as if the people within it don't have like a lot of dirt under their their nails in terms of trying to make things better every day. And I think that's the way to look at healthcare. It's not a theory of absolutes, like it's bad, we've got to make it good. It's trying to make progress every day across many different problems that exist out there. And to use the term, you really got to geek out on the problem in order to be good in this industry. You really do. You were talking about policies. It's just something that a lot of people probably listening to this podcast wouldn't think about, right? But if you don't have an architecture around your policies within your organization and a way to access and use them, well, then you're not going to have any continuity between how you run and operate your organization. So it's, you can have a risk incident or a safety incident. You can have something happen, but you have to then be able to learn from that and then institutionalize that learning. Right? So how do you full loop 360 these problems? Same thing around workforce. We don't do just one thing like scheduling and staffing. We do many different things underneath that umbrella. There's lots of different problems to solve in order to be able to optimize the productivity and the performance of the people who work for you. Right. Much less the satisfaction and the experience of doing the work, which is increasingly, obviously, very challenging. Within healthcare.
I think it's pretty clear it's not just the technology problem. The technology to do all these things have existed for a long time. And an important part of it is bringing it together. But as you kind of suggested too, it's that the learning elements, the people side of things, which I think all of those culture elements and bits and pieces to help out organizations to implement some of this. And I guess that's one thing I've noticed from this event too, is that the strong focus on, development and learning and everything for individuals that are attending here. A lot of people from the healthcare system side and people from RLDatix. I imagine for you, it's a good opportunity to bring together the ecosystem because a lot can happen when you're like this.
Once again, very misunderstood thing about healthcare IT is people think it's about technology. It's not. It's about, for the most part, relationships and reputation. And there's a saying that, what we don't know, we teach each other. And that is so true. Like if you're just, if you're talking to somebody else who's doing a podcast, you're going to get a lot out of that, conversation. Now you can listen to a podcast about podcast and pick up on a few things. But when you really have that peer-to-peer conversation with somebody, that's when the learning really happens. And within organizations, people tend to be siloed, right, within their own organization. And so getting different organizations, different health and care systems, different providers across Australia, across the world together to share stories and learn from each other is incredible, right? Much less with our team, so they can kind of manage things through the distance. But if they're really, spending time with someone and getting to know them, that relationship's going to be incredibly different.
Yes.
And the substance of what they're able to solve together as a team is going to, there's a multiplier effect, that comes from that.
Yeah. Hey, Dan, I feel like we could chat for a lot longer, but as we can see, a session's starting to finish and that there's an opportunity for you to network with many others that will be here today. Lastly, then, for those that are attending the summit over the next day or two, I think you've kind of encapsulated already, but if there was one or two key things you'd hope that attendees take from a session like this, what would they be?
Yeah, the main thing is that, hey, we're a partner. You know, we're not a product, we're not a vendor. We're really here to help solve the problem and get deep. And that's, like I said, that's the biggest thing that comes out of a time like this. And then also optimism. You know, I mean, healthcare is a tough place to be in, and these folks have tough jobs. But at the end of the day, you know, the opportunity to make an impact on people's lives is why people are in healthcare.
Yeah.
And they need that energy that comes from being around other people. Not just the people, but also the ideas that come from that to instigate change. And so, yeah, I mean, we've covered a lot of different things that we do as a company over the last 2 days. There's a tremendous response, you know, from our customer base in terms of their energy around the new things that we're now doing.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't want to just say it's AI, but, you know, there's obviously, you know, like every company, we're investing heavily in AI and some of the advancements we're doing there. But you know, at the end of the day, that's just part of what we're doing, or one element.
Yeah.
And, you know, overall, I think it's just an opportunity for people to think different, act different, and drive change within their organization.